Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting in the town of Qualicum Beach. I just want to acknowledge that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular our Qualicum First Nation. With that, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item is the adoption of the agenda. There will be two additional items, one regarding a request for a reduced rental, and that is going to be under 6.4 of your agenda, Community Hall Subsidy. The other one is a letter of support from the Mount Arizona Biosphere, and that will be under 9.3b. With that, are there any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, then the agenda is adopted as amended by consent. Adoption of the consent agenda. Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Minutes on November 6th, 8th, 10th, and 15th council meetings. Councillor Vander, go ahead.
Just that on the minutes for the 15th of November, there's reference to Robin Robinson made a comment from the public, and sorry. Should be used to that by now. Robin Robinson does not reside in Qualicum Beach, as noted, so we think that that should be changed.
That's the only change?
Yes.
Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you for drawing my attention to the need to do that. Just one question for staff. We rose and report with something from an in-camera from a September 7th meeting. Should that be included in this agenda? Because we made that decision a few weeks ago, just because this was a discussion in the in-camera recently, and I'm not sure I caught it. I might have missed it. My apologies if I did.
It's on page 10, everything that we rose and report on that we're able to rise and report on at this meeting date is on there. Anything that's not on there, we would not be releasing yet. So if there's something specific, we can speak after the meeting. But page 10.
Okay, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I noted that the second committee of the whole meeting for the airport, the minutes were missing, but staff did confirm they'll be on the next one. So just in case people thought that somehow they got missed, they will be coming.
Thank you. Any other errors or omissions in the minutes? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just to clarify, there is something that's missing then. If page 10 is the entire list of everything that we've risen to, then yeah. But it's something that we specifically went over in the last meeting, so that's what it is.
Perhaps we can raise that after the meeting with Ms. Svensson. Thank you. So other than that, any further change or errors or omission in the minutes? And the minutes are approved by consent. Business arising from the minutes, we have the Committee of the Whole Strategic Planning recommendation. It is a staff recommendation, and I turn it over to Ms. Varela to start with.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Council did conduct two open strategic planning sessions in November. At that meeting, the Committee of the Whole recommended approving the strategic plan, which is attached for your convenience. And then subsequently, you will see additional information coming that will almost serve as an appendix to that main document, in which Council confirmed their mission, values, and 6 strategic focus areas.
Thank you. There's a staff recommendations on that particular item. Could I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander, discussion. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, there is just one, the last one, number 16, the new Visitor Information Center public washroom. And I think during strategic planning, I questioned why washroom somewhere else were $350 and this one is $500,000 that we're setting aside. And when I look at the agenda and the building permits, you can build a whole house on Berwick for $650,000. I just question whether that amount needs to be that high. But it is in 2026, so I guess we could leave it for now, but if we need to reduce it in future, I think that would be one of the places where I would start. Thank you.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that figure was based on fairly recent washroom construction. Certainly washrooms, depending on the scale and scope, can be much more significant in cost than just constructing a regular house. However, Council does have the opportunity to review the financial plan every year going forward. So if we can ground truth those numbers more efficiently between 2025 and 2026, Council will also get to look at those numbers again. So right now, staff did recommend that as a placeholder. Again, we serve at the pleasure of Council if you'd like to adjust that amount.
Thank you. Ms. Skipsey, that's it. Thank you. Councillor Vander Valk.
Yes, I just had a question regarding point number 12, where it says the council approved the 2023 to 2027 financial plan in the amount of $800,000 to be increased to $1.8 million for the former bus garage construction. I wonder if you could clarify where that increase is coming from, or is it in fact an increase? Thank you.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we talked about that actually being a reallocation, and Councillor Vander Valk was kind enough to point out this concern ahead of the meeting, so I really appreciate that. So it's not that the project is actually being increased, it's that the pot of money that resulted from the sale of that has been reallocated. And you're going to see a few of these reallocations and different practices as we continue to improve our budgeting process. Again, 2023's budget saw a marked difference from previous years' approaches, and we're still tightening up as we go forward. So we can make a note, and I think it's beneficial for the public to know as well, that that project hasn't been expanded by $1 million. It was actually a reallocation of funds. So I'm not sure if the Director of Finance wants to add something more to my layperson explanation or not.
Well, opening the door to Ms. Hare. Go ahead, Mr. Hare.
Thank you, sir. I think our CAO covered that quite well, so I don't have anything to add to that. Thank you.
What about the gentleman next to you? You've been involved in this for quite some time.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Just for clarification, I'll summarize what we reported previously in the Committee of the Whole when we discussed the budget. So that is, at the time that the town sold land to Naked Naturals, we reserved $1 million for the purpose of investing in amenities in and around the bus garage site. And in the recent strategic planning budgeting process earlier this year, $800,000 was also allocated. So what you're seeing at this review is the combination of those two pots of money, essentially, into one sum of $1.8 million. So I think there was a bit of ambiguity earlier this year when we reviewed the budget, and we're clarifying that through this process so that the monies that are allocated towards investments in and around the bus garage property are seen in the same location. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just to sort of build off the point that Councillor Skipsey made, I think there might be a difference between like our bylaw, when we have the bylaw report which shows the projected building costs, does that include like soft costs? Because I think the variance might partly be that a combination of hard costs and soft costs is what we'd be planning on in terms of our total costs. And residential construction is probably around $360 to $400 a square foot right now. But if you added soft costs on top of that, there's additional funds. That might be why there's a bit of discrepancy. But that's just a guess, because if soft costs are included in those estimates, I recall in an earlier meeting staff mentioning that there's sort of like a formula that they sort of plug into for those values. But that might be it. But Mr. Sells can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. That's a keen observation. I do think that that's one of the reasons for the discrepancy. So when they report on projected building permit values in their application, they wouldn't be including things like contractor profit or other overhead costs. So that's one factor. As Ms. Varela previously identified, I'd also point out that house construction and institutional construction for things like washrooms is order of magnitudes different in terms of the scale of costs and the requirements of construction. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison, thank you. Mr. Sales, any further discussion? There's a staff recommendation to adopt recommendations. Could I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Vander Valk. Is it been moved and seconded already? I didn't think it was. Yes. It was? Thank you. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Councillor Harrison.
Just one thing too, there was some of the things that are for later on that I would personally now, with some of the legislation which we really received after strategic plan, we might switch around because it's 2 or 3 years out. It's kind of a moot point, but just flagging that now. There's changes. I'm sure next year we do this, that we'll be talking about.
Yes, I think that's a foregone conclusion. So further discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carries. Thank you. And then we have the BC Housing, Ms. Svensson.
Yes, sorry, I was just looking up, I wanted to clarify the page 10 with the announcements of the in-camera. I did quickly look while you were discussing that, and there was, my apologies, there was one announcement that was missed that Councillor Harrison was alluding to, and it was that Council directs staff to cancel the memorandum of understanding with BYLAWS Housing Society, subject to the 30-day notice requirement. So Council made that decision at a September 7th meeting, and we rose and report at the November 8th meeting to give time for staff to contact BYLAWS Housing, so they have been notified. So my apologies, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Got it. Next one, a little more comprehensive. Who should I start with talking with about that from staff? Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So at the last meeting, Council did provide direction to staff to draft a letter related to Bill 44. There is a draft included in your agenda. Since the announcement has came up, Council may wish to refer this item back to staff for further refinement prior to sending, because I think the context has changed a bit.
Yes, it has. Could I have a motion to defer this back to staff for updating? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion. All in favor? Sorry, go.
Should we perhaps then, in terms of deferring, I guess there might be some informal communication with what we're looking for. Just because the specific intent of the letter, we might just want to have like email exchange back and forth over the next few days, just so when staff draft a letter, they know where their sort of the council is going, the majority of council is going. Just to make it easier for staff.
And I would also welcome, I think Councillor Skipsey suggested that we would meet with the minister or some of his staff about this particular bill. That would be much appreciated if we could communicate that to the province as well. But other than that, we'll refine the letter and send it accordingly after you have your communications. Ms. Councillor Young.
Could we also possibly defer to have maybe a committee of the whole or have more of a conversation with the public on these bills, Bill 44, Bill 45 as well? And also, I know that this evening, Adam Walker, at his MLA office, he'll be having an open house from 6 to 7:30 this evening regarding Q&A on the housing legislation that's just been passed. So I'd like to have more input if we can before we send any letters out.
I think if our MLA is having that open house, that would probably be more efficient and effective than us having committee of the whole meeting where we're guessing what the province is doing. He knows a lot more about the debate and all the issues that I've been talking about. So thank you for drawing attention to it. I think most of us, if we have an interest in this, should attend the meeting with Mr. Walker and get some more detail. But in the meantime, I think the letter to be referred for refinement with some communication, I think still appropriate. So on the, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and we might also want to look at, there was another bill that was added for automatic pre-approval in certain building designs, and that's a separate bill. I think it's Bill 47 off the top of my head. Staff might want to look at that as well. So what the province proposed with that is that there are certain provincially approved designs which you can just plug into play into any community in BC. And I think that might be something to the point that was being made earlier by Mr. Sales in the last council meeting, that having some control over design elements would be really important. That might be something where we want to really double check with the province what extent do we have control over design elements, or if every aspect of the project is pre-approved from the provincial legislation, because I actually don't know that myself. Or whether it's just the bones of the building is pre-approved and then certain stylistic elements would still be subject to local control.
Thank you. You know, this shows how much uncertainty they've created with this new legislation, which in my opinion was not transparent, was not very democratic. And I think we need to get as much information as we can from our MLA, as much as he knows, not being in the government anymore, on the government side, because we can't take shots in the dark and not getting the information at first. I actually feel, and I say this publicly, that I think the province took a shot in the dark and didn't realize really the implications and the consequences of what they just did to every municipality in this province. I think there's so many shortcomings. One that I've pointed out several times. Why does it have to be in communities like ours? Why not between us and D-Bay? There are at least three community centers where it could be development. They would welcome development. Area F, lots of spaces where people would love to make a fourplex. This to me is a czar, and I don't like it. But I don't want to. I want to talk with them about it, and we seem to have a difficult time to communicate. They just come out with more bills, more laws to make it even more complicated. So, Ms. Varela, we look to you and your experience and your team to get to the bottom of this, and hopefully tonight, if we have a chance to talk with Ms. MLA Walker, we get to the bottom of it. Councillor Harrison.
I just suggest that the legislation, a lot of these bills apply to municipalities with 5,000 or greater, and under provincial legislation, a newly incorporated community that's 5,000 or greater is a city under provincial legislation. So I'm pretty sure that they're looping it into every municipality that under their rules is technically a city it applies to. But to your point, some of those population, like the electoral areas, their total population does exceed 5,000. And the way they're developing is not so much rural, it's more suburban these days.
Totally. The News, Area G, they're basically municipalities, and they have lots of room. And they're still struggling trying to get a detached secondary suite in their areas, which many people would like to have on their large properties. So I think they're coming from a big city perspective, and they haven't really looked at what it's like to live on the ground in Qualicum Beach area. Anyway, the letter as recommendation and the changes that we made verbally, I think we can let that and leave it in the hands of our senior staff. Ready for the discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Electric flight training. Yesterday I had the pleasure of flying back from Holland, coming from Holland, the last flight with SQ Air, and talked with the owner about the potential of having electric planes coming into Qualicum Beach, which I think is what a lot of people would like from the noise perspectives and other things. And I think we could really use some positive talk about the airport. So with that, Ms. Fraser and Ms. Marshall, if you would like to come forward, please.
Westbrook and Council, Mike Andrews from Sealand Flight.
Okay. Good to see you again, Nancy. Yes. For those who don't know, Nancy Marshall and I served on the International North Pacific Fisheries Commission and traveled to Japan trying to talk them out of using high-sea drift nets. It's good to see you, Nancy. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your time today. My name is Mike Andrews. As Nancy said, I used to, I do currently work for Sealand. I'm a professional pilot, a flight instructor, an outright aviation geek, and I'm ecstatic to be here presenting this unique opportunity on behalf of Sealand Flight and Sealand Aviation. Next slide, please. Oh, that skipped one. That's okay. Since their foundation in 1981, the name Sealand has been synonymous with innovation. From creating one of Canada's largest floatplane maintenance shops. Next slide, please. Then widely modifying and improving iconic Canadian bush planes. Next slide, please. Then creating a network of flight schools to increase access to aviation for people of all ages. To now becoming an industry leader in increasingly eco-friendly aircraft power plants. Next slide, please. Sealand Aviation's red engine beaver conversion allows these popular aircraft to have 1/4 of the environmental impact compared to the original design, which is in the background of this picture. And next slide, please. This prototype started flying in February of 2023. Next slide, please. However, today I'm thrilled to share our latest leap in sustainable aviation, a fully electric training aircraft, our Pipistrel Velis Electro. Next slide, please. We are confident that learning about the future of electric aviation will inspire Council to pursue collaborative opportunities to become a leader in this movement. So why are we interested in electric aircraft? There's 0 emissions. They're ultra quiet. They're about as loud as the dishwasher, on average. They're easy to maintain, and they're cheaper to purchase than the comparable factory-new traditional aircraft. Electric aircraft are the way of our future in aviation, and they're here right now. Harbor Air, next slide please, Helijet, and Air Canada, major players in the aviation industry, all working towards implementing these sustainable aircraft. Next slide please. Sealand Flight will have our fully electric aircraft flying these very skies around Qualicum Beach by spring of 2024, and we're planning on adding 2 more to our school fleet in the coming years. El Libradero will be soon afterwards. Next slide, please. This Italian company by the name of Pipistrel was recently purchased by Textron Aviation. Next slide, please. Textron Aviation is the largest general aviation manufacturer in the world. Their Velis Electro airplane that we have purchased is the world's very first certified electric airplane. It is already training new pilots in European countries. Meanwhile, Transport Canada, the regulators of all things aviation, has selected our flight school to be the second in all of Canada to work with them in evaluating the use of these electric aircraft in commercial operations. Other privately owned experimental electric aircraft have been operating in Canada for a few years already. However, just like electric cars, none of these aircraft can get very far without the availability of chargers. Next slide, please. Thus, the more infrastructure that is created, the more that sustainable aviation can replace that which is non-sustainable. Our vision for the future of sustainable aviation has electric aircraft or public aircraft chargers as common as fuel pumps currently are at airports across Canada. We've all seen this happen with electric cars in the last decade, and now aircraft are marking their foundation as well. This is already happening in Europe and the USA. Next slide, please. Our contacts and leaders at BC Hydro share this exact same vision and ambition. Next slide, please. They are currently awaiting municipalities to work with to ignite the start of viable zero-emissions aviation. The opportunity to turn this vision into reality is available to us right now. Sealand Flight and El Libradero, with the support of the town's airport managers, believe that Qualicum Beach Airport is an ideal airport to embark on this public electric aircraft charger, one of Canada's first. With its central location, it is a gateway to allowing electric aircraft to reach further and further distances in communities. Next slide, please. I gather that from all this, you can understand why transitioning towards sustainable aviation is not only desirable, but why it is necessary and why it is happening right now. Next slide, please. While envisioning the Qualicum Beach Airport as a beacon of sustainable aviation in a greener future, we asked the Town Council investigate the process and funding opportunities of creating one of Canada's first electric aircraft charging stations. Additionally, we ask that you include future opportunities to pursue sustainable aviation in a master plan for the Qualicum Beach Airport. We look forward to collaborating with you on this groundbreaking opportunity. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions of the delegation? Councillor Harrison.
So I think it was July or August of this year, we had to sit down meeting with BC Hydro about streetlights. And there was one executive who was waylaid, so we had a bit of chance to chat. I did actually specifically mention the three-phase power we need at the airport for, basically there's a heavy-duty industrial-grade power for folks who don't know what that means. They didn't immediately leap like, this is the funding stream and we'll do this tomorrow, but it is something that's sort of, I'm sure, on their radar. And also just for the public's benefit in terms of that sort of infrastructure, if we were going to look at engaging more land at the airport for airport uses over time, they'd probably be expected that we'd need to put in that infrastructure anyways. So this is something where the bones have multiple uses for this. And then it's essentially just the charging station itself would be the discussion point. But just one question I would have is through the chair is, I just saw on that Aerobus slide, it was the hydrogen for the larger plane. So is that something as well in terms of like, I know for transportation, the provincial government is offering funding for like long haul trucking and stuff like that for hydrogen. Is that something that you guys have been looking at all? And I know you're doing one thing sustainable already, so doing two is kind
yeah,
of
not that I'm aware of for hydrogen specifically. There's lots of funding opportunities available for all sustainable. One program that we've been heavily involved with is Clean BC, and that's through BC Hydro as well.
Thank you. Councillor Vander Valk.
I just had a question at the end of your presentation. You talked about having, I'm not sure if it was a facility at the airport through the master plan. Could you just clarify what you said exactly?
Oh, yes, the last request, just allowing or including opportunity for future sustainable aviation projects. So there's possibilities of, let's say, using solar power to charge aircraft, that kind of thing, to allow opportunity for growth in a airport master plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any other quick comments, Councillor Young?
Do you have an idea of what it would cost for a electric charging station? And would this also, when you talk about the green grants, would this also qualify like in a retrofit grant?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with a retrofit grant.
They have retrofit grants currently for buildings that are going to be more sustainable. So,
truthfully, I'm not quite sure. That is our request to council, is to start investigating into what kind of opportunities are available. We know of some through our contact with BC Hydro, and they're wanting to work with municipalities to start finding the opportunities, and they have in-house grant seekers and writers and stuff to find the funding opportunities. And we met with Qualicum Beach Airport Manager here, Kevin, as well, who's keen on working on this project and finding those opportunities.
Yeah, one of the questions was, do you have any idea what it costs to, I saw there was a mobile unit there on one of the slides, but do you know what a fixed charging station would cost with a three-phase power?
So the three-phase power is going to be where we're finding the biggest cost hurdles, and that's with BC Hydro. So the hope that we have is that BC Hydro will see the opportunity to work with municipalities and help with that funding itself, to pull the three-phase power, as Councillor Harris mentioned, from where it currently is into the airport is probably going to be the most expensive part. We've looked at numbers in between $30,000 to $60,000, just roughly ballpark, from BC Hydro to make just that connection. The actual charger itself is still something like this movement is changing every single day. So the actual physical structure of the charger isn't something that we have available right away. Pipistrel, the company that manufactures the aircraft, is actually founding or developing their own charger that would be suitable. The portable ones that we're going to be using to start with, they just look like a little cart, and they plug into either three-phase power or a 220-volt charger. Cost about $20,000 to $25,000.
Thank you. As far as the weight of the batteries, because I noticed when Harbour Air had one of the Beavers converted to electric, it looked like it was loaded, but there was only, I think, one person in it. So how does it look for weight on these planes you're talking about?
That's correct. So in the packages actually that I gave you, we'll have all the stats to this particular aircraft too, and it will, I can't remember off the top of my head the max payload. It can only take about 350 to 400 pounds worth of crew basically, and that's why flight training is where these aircraft are best suited to start, because they can't carry very much and they can't fly for very long. I had in one of the slides actually that they can only fly for about 50 minutes or so, which is the average length of a training flight. So it's the perfect place to start with them. The Harbour Air aircraft in particular it's quite inspirational, but the practical use of it is so low at the moment because of the weight of the batteries, and part of that is that it needs much more power than something as light as these training aircraft do, specifically, being on floats. And yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Vander Valk?
So you're looking then specifically only at training?
That is correct, for the time being. Ultimately, we hope that our long-term vision is that electric aircraft, just like electric cars, can slowly start to replace the traditional aircraft. And we're looking at helping expand that network. Getting involved in this project with specifically BC Hydro, who's going to be the one providing the power, and figuring out what it looks like to have one of these charging stations developed is going to be something that we can use, or that BC Hydro can use, other municipalities can use, to replicate this all over the province. And that's ultimately our long-term vision.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
And just to sort of point out, the one thing I thought that was really fascinating about your presentation is just the map showing the connection to all the different communities. And that's why I think we do want to be early movers on this, is that Electric flights are sort of best suited for short-range flights, not for cross-Canada yet.
That's right.
Eventually. And to Mayor Westbrook's point, he raised the best point, an excellent point about the battery weight. Now, who knows what batteries will be like in 30 years' time, but for now, it's a big impediment. But because of our location being so central to all these nodes, it really is in our interest to be an early mover on this. And a lot of the bones are things we'd be doing for commercial development anyways.
Absolutely.
So it's not like we're spending a huge amount of money on this. So yeah, I think this is a very timely presentation and it's very apropos.
Thank you.
And really appreciate you presenting that information to the public, that we can sort of connect to, this is why it's a great thing to look at for the town. And just because I'm also involved with the Airport Users Committee, we've had these informal conversations about electrification for months. So this is not coming out of left field from the staff side. I know staff are paying attention to this informally.
Yeah. So ultimately, we'd like to collaborate and work and research and find what opportunities exist for the funding part of it, because obviously that's going to be the major concern. And BC Hydro is quite excited about this opportunity and willing to work with municipalities to figure out how this is going to be viable.
And we like working with BC Hydro too, most of the time. Councillor Young.
Where are these planes made, and wouldn't it be more practical to have the testing the airplanes closer to where it's being manufactured than out here?
So they are widely used in Europe and have been for several years. The company is called Pipistrel and it's based in Italy. Ours is currently on a shipping container at the moment. Will be delivered in mid-January to Vancouver. So they've been flying all over the world. There's actually one currently in Waterloo. They've had it for, I think, close to a year. The Waterloo Wellington Institute for Sustainable Aviation has been testing this to see how it operates in Canada and what kind of differences. That's a major part that we're running into, is the differences in charging infrastructure and requirements as opposed to in Europe. And so in Europe, they do have a loop that you can fly, and people own these type of aircraft privately and just fly them for fun. And you can fly around Paris, stopping all in different countries and charging. They have about an equal charge time to flight time, so you can stop, take a break, get some food, and then continue going. So the testing phase is done. It's a certified airplane in Europe, and now Canada, or Transport Canada, is experimenting with them to see how we can implement them to our current structure of regulations. That's the big one, is our current regulations require that you have fuel gauges and oil gauges and all these kinds of things. So it's totally new to us to be operating a electric aircraft, and that's actually one of the challenges that Harbour Air is facing right now, is the regulatory requirements and why they've been delayed. They were supposed to be flying their airplane as of this year, but it's going to be at least another 2 years.
Councillor Harrison.
And just because something that I know, and I think Tiara could probably actually speak to it much better than I ever could, maintenance is a very regulated, very heavily controlled area. Does it require new training for the mechanics and for the people working? I'm seeing a nodding head, so.
Yes, absolutely. And Pipistrel, the manufacturer of this aircraft, are actually traveling to us in Campbell River to Sealand Aviation, to the maintenance shop, which was pictured at the beginning of the presentation there, to train all of our mechanics on how to maintain these aircrafts. And so in Campbell River will eventually be a hub for electric aircraft maintenance as well.
Well, thank you. If there's no other questions or comments, I'd like to say that welcome.
Thank you.
To Qualicum Beach. We've heard a lot at the last two meetings with the Raleigh Airport about noise, but also about lead in the fuel. So this is a welcome opportunity for us to consider. And I believe, Ms. Varela, that this could be discussed at our budget discussions to look at what it would take for us to get started, because I think from all the comments and questions, they're all in a positive light, that we'd like to see advancement of this. And I can't think of a better place for anyone to fly to Qualicum Beach in an electric plane, have lunch at our restaurant, and carry on and come back when on the way home again. So This is a great, I think, opportunity in many ways. It ticks off a lot of boxes. So I would be very excited to hear this discussion at our strategic plan or budget discussions. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So later in this agenda, we are seeking Council's direction to apply for a grant for a master plan, and I think that the discussion that you're having here today is actually linked to that type of an airport master plan. So we'll leave that decision-making with Council, but we're here.
Thank you. With that, thank you very much for taking the time. And Ms. Marshall, good to see you again. By the way, Ms. Marshall, you may know the written name, Marshall Stevenson, the estuary in the Little Qualicum River. That was Ms. Marshall's family that made that happen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have the Qualicum Beach Historical and Museum Society. And Tiara, thank you as well for attending. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you at the microphones. I thought you were in support. Yeah, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to skip quickly through the things that my colleagues shared so eloquently. And first, just offering my gratitude to be here on the ceded traditional territories of the Qualicum First Nation. I'm here today representing Early Bird Arrow, and I'm also going to tie it with the work and the plans that we have for Esqueo Air. Thank you. So Early Bird Arrow is all about things innovation in aerospace. We're into electric and hydrogen, yes. We're very excited about the development of hydrogen technology, which is advancing very, very quickly, which is very exciting. All of this is about how do we reduce our footprint on Mother Earth. We're also interested in immersive technology, Councillor Harrison, around how we ready maintenance for an entirely new way of maintaining an aircraft, and the battery and charging infrastructure that goes with that. I'll just point out with the Electro Velis, we are likely to come shortly after our friends at Sealand here with an Electro Velis. Early Bird Arrow is headquartered at Boundary Bay in Delta in British Columbia. And, but yes, like Mike said, 60 decibels, which is about as loud as a normal conversation with people 3 feet apart. Very, very quiet. And you've seen it here, the inside. Charging, of course, that's what we need some help with here. And the charging infrastructure network. I think there's opportunity to work and establish the very first network of electric charging aircraft infrastructure at airports in Canada. We're currently in the research phase, installation at Early Bird's home in Boundary Bay, Nanaimo, Qualicum Beach, and of course, Campbell River, Victoria, creating an entire network. So there's opportunity here. Qualicum Beach, I think, biased, but I think Qualicum Beach is very, very fortunate to have both Sealand and Early Bird Arrow, who are pioneers in this work, wanting to work here and develop these opportunities at Qualicum Beach. So what do we need? Again, I'll emphasize it, three-phase power, publicly available charging infrastructure, and airport master planning. And I'll share a little bit about why I think that that is so important. With Esqueo Air, I said I was going to connect this in. We're looking at how we walk more softly on Mother Earth. And the future of transportation is about to be forever changed with something called advanced air mobility, which is how we're moving people and goods using electric and hydrogen fuel cell technology. And the aircraft are here. These are some examples of advanced air mobility aircraft, which are electric, vertical, takeoff and landing technology. Brand new aircraft design. So in 2023, WISC became a fully owned subsidiary with Boeing. So when people have questions about, is this real, is this coming, or is this aspirational, every single major manufacturer is now partnered with an advanced air mobility manufacturer. Currently, there are 200 OEMs or manufacturers in some stage of development of these advanced air mobility aircraft. There are 6 in the certification stage, and there is 1 this one, Whisk, in partnership with Boeing, it's a Boeing company, that is moving to straight, I don't know that it will happen, but they're still saying they're moving straight to autonomous. And it's flying now. Helijet, of course, has now partnered with Beta Technologies and put orders in. They're going to integrate these aircraft, eVTOL, or electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, right into their existing network of helicopter services. Again, Archer is paired with United Airlines. Everyone is on board, paired with somebody, and partnerships. They are preparing to bring Midnight, that's the name of this aircraft, to market in 2025, which is not very long from now. And they're looking to connect Newark Airport and New York City in a 10-minute flight. I think probably most folks here are watch the Jetsons. In our industry, we don't really talk about that. We don't refer to the Jetsons, but I'm going to today because that is coming to reality. Small air, we call them air taxis. Joby flew their aircraft Sunday, November 12th. You'll notice the dates. A lot has happened just in the last couple of months in the advanced air mobility world. From the downtown heliport in Manhattan to JFK, 7-minute flight. Joby is partnered with Delta Airlines, NASA, and Uber. Eve is by the manufacturer, large aircraft manufacturer Embraer, and Eve has a pipeline, they say, of approximately $5.2 billion, comprised of over 1,700 vehicle orders already. As my friend Mike said, Air Canada Eve is even on board. They have ordered 30 of these electric hybrid aircraft by Heart Aerospace, and they believe so much in what Heart Aerospace is doing that they invested $5 million in equity into Heart Aerospace in addition to their orders. So noise, right? The Hearing Health Foundation of New York describes 60 decibels as background music. Just that background music that you hear, it kind of feels warm and nice. And 70 decibels is average office noise. And this is a Joby aircraft. NASA did a whole study and registered 45.2 decibels on the ground when the aircraft flew at 1,600 feet. That sound level will be barely perceptible. I spoke with some folks that had been flying the Electro Velis at Waterloo, and for pilots like myself, it was actually very disconcerting because you don't hear anything. So quiet, sustainable air transportation technology is here now, and it's part of the future. So what's needed at Qualicum Beach? 3-phase electric power. We're saying it a lot because it's important, it's critical. Without 3-phase, it will take at least double the time for charging. We need publicly available charging infrastructure and airport master planning that includes solar, electric, hydrogen, and vertiport technology. And so let's work together. You've got a powerful team here with Sealand Flight, Elibird Aero, Esqueo Air, and of course the town and the airport at Qualicum Beach. We'd love to work together to get the infrastructure that we need in place and the master planning that's necessary for this future growth that is certain. And let's work together on those funding opportunities. I think there is many opportunities for access to movement to clean and green technologies. Thank you.
Thank you for your, again, excellent presentation, and thank you for running the HQ Air out of our Qualicum Beach Airport. Very much appreciated.
My pleasure to serve the community.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Drea? Go ahead.
And just so folks might not know, Tiara sits on, I think you've been doing, like, sitting on a board for clean aerospace for I don't know how many years. Yeah. Every year there's a bunch of awards you get. I see your used to be called Twitter, and now it's something else, feed. But TIRA is award-winning for a bunch of different business organizations across BC, and you can go online and look that up. Just one of the earliest slides in your presentation looked at what looked like more like commercial delivery as opposed to passenger aircraft. I'm wondering if that's something that you've looked at all in terms of opportunities for delivering commercial goods through the local airport and using, again, sustainable infrastructure to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of opportunities in the heavy lift drone because basically it's a spectrum. When we're talking about RPAS or remote piloted aircraft systems or large drones, we're not talking about that little small thing that makes a lot of noise in the backyard, right? We're talking about large-sized drones that can deliver goods, that can deliver life-saving medical treatments, supplies, vaccines, and the work that we're doing, Esqueo Air is a founding member of the Canadian Advanced Air Mobility Consortium, along with Danny Sitnam at Helijet. There's 18 of us founding members. So yes, I've been involved in this for a very, very long time. And this has been part of the vision of Esqueo Air since its inception, is how do we find ways to disrupt our current air transportation system so that we can, what I say, reimagine, rematriate, and rebuild an air transportation system that centers equity and sustainability. And so.
Thank you for your visionary approach and your commitment and dedication to make it happen. Try and make it happen. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Young.
I'm naive to this. Do we need to provide hangar space as well? Because there's going to be so many more planes in our area?
Well, I think that that's part of the emphasis on a long-term airport master plan, is to look at what is needed in terms of infrastructure to be able to I think Qualicum Beach can be a pioneering airport in clean transportation. So certainly vertiport technology, hangar space, what does that look like is an important thing to give some thought and consideration to.
Thank you. The timing is ideal because we're looking at a master plan or trying to get a grant to start with, and not hearing the planes in Qualicum Beach will not be a problem. So with that, I think staff has enough feedback from the questions and comments raised by both the delegations and councillors that we will have a follow-up conversation when we talk about the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Qualicum Beach Historical Museum Society. Who'd like to speak first? Lorraine? Go ahead, Lorraine.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for inviting us. My name is Lorraine Bell, and I'm the director of the Qualicum Beach Museum. And also here is David Ireland, our board president. And I'd like to share with you the highlights of our last fiscal year and some of our current activities and our future plans. So we'd like to express our thanks to the town and the wider community of Qualicum Beach for their support of the museum. This year we developed a new strategic plan, and one of its key points is how important it is for us to make connections with our community. And we do work hard to make the museum a welcoming and inclusive place for both residents and visitors. And we are getting more visitors and participation in our programs. In part, this is because we now have 2 full-time staff members, so we're able to offer more events and outreach activities. And overall, I'd say last year had us doing a lot of planning, as well as finding new ways to connect with community. So as a nonprofit, we have a volunteer board, and that provides oversight and accountability to the Societies Act. And also many board members volunteer for other things. And this year we're very pleased to welcome 2 new board members, Ray Wawrniak and Fern Higgins. And we'd also like to thank our town liaison, Jean Young, for her support and interest, and also for her great idea this year about participating in the Communities in Bloom initiative. We really enjoyed being involved in that. And finally, we have, whoops, that's enough, that's okay. And finally, we have 2 full-time staff members, myself and Cassell Reed, as well as 2 seasonal staff members from May through August, and many volunteers. So especially for community events, we really appreciate our volunteers who help so much. It takes about 300 volunteer hours to make one event, Children's Day, happen each year. So great news, we opened our We Have the Power exhibit last June, and it's received a lot of interest and feedback from the public. And in the summer, this summer coming up, we plan to host a temporary exhibit in the Powerhouse next, and that one's about skateboarding. And we've lately been creating activities for special days, such as Truth and Reconciliation and Orange Shirt Day, Remembrance Day, Family Day, and the Brant Festival. And work is also ongoing with our outreach kits of local history for teachers to use in their classrooms. We have a program for younger kids called History Detectives, where they solve a mystery using clues from the museum, such as photographs, letters, and historical objects. We do have many archives and artifacts that we collect, conserve, and catalog. And often these lead to really interesting details about the history of Qualicum Beach. We recently received a lovely painting of Qualicum Annie, which is very special because we don't have many photographs of her. And we also received a truly remarkable collection of the photographs, documents, and belongings of Qualicum Beach resident Jack Smythe. And he was a veteran of World War I and a member of the Veterans Guard in World War II. Oh, just not quite yet. Okay. I'd also like to point out on the bottom is the 1918 voters list, which a local resident actually found by accident stuffed in an old magazine. And it has a lot of local names, including many women. And so we were not sure what they were voting for, but the timing is around when women got the vote in Canada. And so we think it might be related to that. So that's a really interesting thing to find. And so that's just a few of the 3,000 objects we have and 2,500 or so archives that we look after in our collection. Thanks. We like to support local businesses and collaborate with local organizations. We also have working relationships with various government agencies. We try to keep track of what's happening provincially and nationally in the museum sector, so we can respond to important issues or events or apply for funding opportunities as they arise. And so we do feel very fortunate to have funding from the town, and I think in combination with solid governance and permanent staff and our new strategic plan, I feel like we're in good shape to secure funds from other sources for special projects. One such special project is an elevator, which we feel like we really need. So we're still working on that one. Next slide. Okay, I mentioned that we did some strategic planning last year, and this helped us clarify our mission, values, and strategic direction, and basically the main impacts we hope to have as an organization. And so those are that everyone feel welcome, that our site is accessible, that we commit to diversity and equity, and that we have operational and environmental sustainability. We've also been thinking about our outdoor spaces and how to improve them. And we got some help from HAPA Collaborative to do a landscape plan. We want the site to be more accessible, as I mentioned, and also to be an even better community and interpretive space. We hope to start this year by changing the gravel to crusher dust. And even with that simple step, it's easier to traverse for people who have mobility challenges. We also have some work bees planned to clean up the invasive species and the brush piles in the back lot. Next. Basically, the work never ends. So here's the highlights of our work plan in more detail, and this will be included with our report to the town. And our summer student made it look like our dinosaur models are actually life-size and visiting the museum. So that's what we use for International Friendship Day on our posts. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's our current budget. I think it's probably too tiny to really see. And our preliminary year ends from our last fiscal. I just wanted to mention that the town matching grant came a bit after our last fiscal close, so that would show up on this year's revenue. And so for expenses, I would say our main concern at the moment is just basically keeping up with costs that are generally going up everywhere, and sort of adjusting and economizing where we can. And also the federal funding we get for students only covers minimum wage, even at this point. And so we're finding this doesn't quite attract the young applicants like it used to. So we're boosting that up. And last year we offered $22 an hour to the students, and that seemed to help encourage more qualified and excellent applicants. So if anybody would like some more detailed information, we have these documents that I can share with you. And that's about all I have for now. Thank you for listening, and let me know if you have any questions later, but for now I'll pass it on to David Ireland, and we'll also show you something that we found. We had some videotapes that were still in VHS format in the archives, and Cliff Craven kindly digitized them for us, so we wanted to share that with you today. So I'll just pass it on to David.
Thanks, Elaine. David, you have the floor.
Good morning, Your Worship, councillors, and our fellow presenters this morning. My name again is David Ireland, and more recently, an update to what you saw there, I have been elected as the president of the Qualicum Beach Museums. And I think it always appropriate, and particularly at this time of the year, to express continuing thanks and respect to a number of people that have made this morning and the museum the possibility that it is today. And I'd like to start with Your Worship, Mayor Westbroek. You've been a constant and long-term supporter of what we're doing, and we're greatly appreciative of that. My tenure with the museum has been in the order of 10 to 12 years now, so I had the privilege of working back in the day with the town representative, our now MLA, Adam Walker, and then in succession, Ann Skipsey, and Scott Harrison, and now Jean Young, all who have done outstanding work for us, and we know somebody has our back. We're not voices crying in the wilderness, and we have people with some historical connection to the town too, and that's vitally important to our success. And of course, thank you to Heather Svensson for your continued support, a real challenge. We're going to make a small presentation here in a moment, as Lorraine mentioned, but I also feel a certain history, because about 120 years ago now, and with a master's degree in aeronautical engineering and weapons design, if you will, I was absolutely enamored by the presentation earlier this morning. We are at that stage in electric development where we were 120 years ago with trying to a gas-powered engine, but it's coming on very, very fast. And as a complement to what we heard this morning, I think not only is this infrastructure that we're hearing about important to the development of Qualicum Beach and its airport facilities, but it is perfectly congruent with the move to electric vehicles on the ground. And if ever we're going to get the Island Corridor and ENN Railway working in any functional fashion, put it like a SkyTrain above the ground, out of the way of weather, animals, and people who try and populate that track space at the same time, and turn it into a real world-class go-to destination. Come here. So whatever we do electrically is an investment in our future, I'm sure. So with that introduction, I'd like to share with you some historical aspects of the museum, and these have been a variety of videotapes and other sources that one of our directors, namely Cliff Craven, has put together, and they are just a fascinating insight into where we've come from, where we are, who we are, and the various things that have been involved in the development of Qualicum Beach. So can we roll that, Wesley? I'm greatly appreciative. And this is just a very small sampling of video information that's available through the museum, and we're trying to promote it. So to our fellow Mayor and councillors, whenever you have the opportunity, please inform people, because you're widely connected and deeply connected with many people who I believe will be interested in what we have to offer.
With its busy shopping center, where one can purchase,
you might see one of my original cars there,
such as antiques, curios, or one can lounge away carefree hours in the warm rays of the afternoon sun. There
Your
is
lips are
sport
sealed,
for
right?
everyone at Qualicum Beach. Golf is a major attraction on the lush fairways of these picturesque links. A potential champ gets a lusty one away from the tee.
Thus has the new Island Highway, with its superb and faultless design, opened the door to this island of holiday happiness.
Some of the buildings are on the seashore, and some in wooded dells away from the hustle and bustle of the merrymakers at the beach. Places where one can browse in the colorful solitude of the many beautiful gardens and flower-bordered walks in the vicinity.
And that, of course, is the locomotive that you'll see just
in front of the
down
old
the road here
powerhouse
from
at Qualicum
here
Beach.
as
We're
it
going
was
to be
brought on
talking with
site.
the Qualicum Beach Historical Society. They've been quite busy. If you've gone past the train station recently, you probably will have seen the train that they have brought in. And
Well, this powerhouse was built in 1930, and it was first opened to generate power.
To give $3,000 towards this museum.
And once we complete that, we hope to move into phase 2, which is the reconstruction of the powerhouse as it was at Port Alberni.
The Qualicum Beach Revitalization Project has given birth to the building of Heritage Park. Situated around the train station and historical museum in Qualicum Beach, as we see a 50-year-old church moving into place on November 3rd.
It's where we are looking for more volunteers. They can contact us through the Historic Society.
We've got the sunshine of your life. We average $2,000 of sunshine a year. You can play golf all year round. We have our own full-time recreation director at Qualicum who coordinates activities.
No matter how your clients arrive at their oceanside destination, they'll all have one experience in common: a warm and friendly welcome.
Well, thank you, and hopefully that warmed a few hearts and brought back fond memories. And to know where we're going, we knew from where we've come from. So on behalf of the Qualicum Beach Historical and Museum Society, thank you. A big shout out to Lorraine and Cassell, who are doing outstanding work for making that museum work and be the facility it is today. I do encourage you, as time and circumstance permit, please come, but bring friends, bring your children, bring your grandchildren, and see what the museum has to offer. There's something for everybody. And on that note, I'd like to close, but in doing so, wish each and every one of you a very happy Christmas and a prosperous and rewarding new year to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Since you walked away, I guess there are no questions, but I think we got the information pretty well from both of you. Lorraine, excellent job. David, really appreciate your commitment to this museum. And by the way, that picture of that hotel you saw was replicated in the Qualicum Manor. And there was a connection with the ownership who wanted to make it look like the old hotel. And the daughter of the manager at the time ended up living in the Qualicum Manor as a retiree and patient resident in the Qualicum Manor. And she used to have the same room in the same location looking out towards the west of the golf course. So there's a lot of history there that I found is very interesting in Qualicum Beach once you dig a little deeper. Thank you for your work, both of you. Thank you. Correspondence, we have a letter from the Broombusters Invasive Plant Society, and there's a staff recommendation but not a number attached. And I think it may be appropriate to make that a longer term commitment, perhaps in the form of a 5-year agreement, fee-for-service agreement, with a new number attached. What is Councillor's wish? Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah, well, I would support a 5-year agreement, and I thought, the request was that they had been receiving $1,000, I think, annually for the work that all the volunteers provide. So I would propose $1,200, I think, given that this agreement was quite old, going back quite a ways, so.
So your motion would be to increase the service to $1,200 into a 5-year term agreement.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a second for that? Councillor Vander, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Then the swimming pool local service area amendment bylaw. I'll ask Mr. Hare to speak to it briefly about the implications of this change to the bylaw. Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the current agreement for the swimming pool bylaw is based, the RDN runs the swimming pool and basically the region owns it. So the current arrangement is the recovery of costs is based on 50% usage and 50% assessment. And it results in a, sorry, let me just grab my numbers for that here. It results in a recovery of about $853,000 from the town. The proposal is to include Nanoose Bay in the recovery formula. They're currently not included, and also to base the recovery on 100% usage. And that would result in an increase of about 17,000. So based on the same types of numbers, it would result in a cost of $871,000 to the town. And it would bring the Nanoose Bay on, but it would provide less recovery from the other 3 electoral areas, being Bowser, Deep Bay, and Qualicum Bay. And I'd be happy to address any questions on that.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
So I don't mind the shift towards utilization, but the only thing that sort of for me is a bit of a concern is the methodology is based on surveys that were done, and there's no factual underpinning of the survey. It's just how you respond to a question. So folks in Nanoose space say, "Oh, I never used the pool," and that's how you respond to the survey. Then you don't pay anything, as opposed to actually people going there, using the pool. Okay, here's your address on our file. We see this is your 5th visit, so we're tracking where people actually show up. So I do think the usage model that's perfectly fair, but that's just the only proviso I'd have sort of on the town level. I know we're not going to change things at this point, but I just sort of flag that in a perfect world it would be based on tracking people actually as they come in and use the pool, as opposed to surveys that were done in the past, because it's averaging the last 3.
Thank you. Ms. Varela?
Staff can add a little bit more information to that methodology, Your Worship.
Mr. Hare?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, the methodology, as Councillor Harrison had mentioned, was every 5 years the RDN engages in a consultant to conduct a usage survey. And so in addition to the survey, I was advised by the RDN that they do polling at Ravensong as well. And other methods that they take into account in monitoring usage is gathering information from program registrations and swipe card usage.
Yes, that was the concern that was raised, because Councillor Skipsey and Councillor Vander, they brought in 2 students from the area, not from Qualicum Beach, who swim in our pool, but people don't ask, and often people think they live in Qualicum Beach. Now, most homeowners would know that their taxes do not go to Qualicum Beach, but if you're a tenant, you wouldn't know that. And my daughter and her husband and 3 children live in Arrington. They swim at the pool. They never asked, where do you live? And often people think they live in Qualicum Beach because their postal code or phone number says they're in Qualicum Beach, and they're not. So I have a little difficulty with that. The other one is that I feel there's a bit of an inconsistency. If we're going to do it for the pool, why not do it for the arena? So I think that's another major cost center for Qualicum Beach and for all the areas. But if it's going to be based on usage, which is fair, I think services like water, sewer, roads, that's 2 properties. These are for people. So I think if we're going to do it for the pool, they should also do it for other areas. And this whole thing will probably change when the Parksville or Regional District pool in Parksville comes to a referendum. And I'm not going to speculate what the cost of such a pool would be, but it's going to be very high. And I doubt, I'm not sure, but it could be a very difficult referendum to get passed. And if that doesn't pass, then we'll go back to the original plan, which was to add to our pool, which in the meantime has cost us probably more than double of what originally was thought about 5 years ago. So I'm okay with approving this. It's a temporary measure at this point, and I think it's in principle fair, but that should be more consistent. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I just wonder, when we send our letter acknowledging our decision, whether we could include our concerns regarding perhaps how the residents' address is determined, and also your point about it being fair across the board, and that we also look at the arena and base it on usage as well. I just think providing that feedback is important.
Thank you. I think that is quite appropriate. I've made those comments, obviously, but to have it in writing, on record, from a council perspective, I think would even emphasize what I've been saying as your director. Mr. Hare?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. One thing I should have mentioned that the RDN did also advise was that their survey, they had mentioned that it is statistically valid and has a 2.5% margin of error in terms of tracking those statistics. So again, it's information that was received from the RDN, but I thought it's of value to add that.
Thank you. So we'll approve this and then make a motion to add some comments about our concerns. So on the recommendation, all in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Now, if you'd like to make a motion, Councillor Skipsey?
Well, that the letter to the RDN include our concerns around methodology and inconsistency. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Councillor Harrison's discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. Salamander Pond. There is a staff recommendation. Just perhaps explain the location. Who would like to speak to that? Mr. Sales? It's the pond by the elementary school on the west end. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. As you'll see in your package, the town received correspondence from an elementary school teacher with a recommendation that the pond be renamed from Contaminant Pond to something more charming. So that they have made the recommendation of Salamander Pond. And so in alignment with that recommendation from her class, we'd like to propose to put a sign on the site labeling it as Salamander Pond. Thank you.
I think that's very clear and concise. So we have a motion to that effect. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander Valk, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. And then the additional one regarding the request for rental subsidy for the BC Police and Curling Championship Banquet. So there is a recommendation. I support the recommendation. I think we can expect about 100 participants, not only RCMP, but also firefighters, and then there is another non-competitive side to it. So I think it's a wonderful thing for us to host and to waive the subsidy appropriate. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. And we have a public hearing regarding the zoning amendment of 127-141 Fifth Avenue East. And this public hearing is convened pursuant to 464 Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to council respecting the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. So at this public hearing, you'll be asked to come forward, state your name. We don't need your address anymore, but just your name, and if you live in Qualicum Beach or not, you can say that. And but keep your comments to the issue at hand. So, Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The subject of today's public hearing is to consider a zoning amendment application for a property at 127 and 141 Fifth Avenue East. And the proposal is to permit the parcel to be subdivided into two parcels. The two existing multifamily residential buildings that currently exist on the site would remain as is, so there's essentially no physical changes proposed. But if council does advance this zoning bylaw, the two buildings would be able to have separate ownership, whereas currently they're on the same parcel and have to be owned collectively. One other aspect to this zoning amendment is that if council does proceed with the zoning amendment, the tenure of this site would be limited to residential rental in the future, and so it would be preserved in the long term, whereas currently the site is designated for multifamily, but there's nothing that would restrict a future owner from potentially considering a redevelopment and or strata conversion. Thank you.
So with that, are there any, excuse me, is there anyone in here who would like to speak to this? Just come on up. And just state your name and whether you live in Qualicum Beach, and whether you speak for yourself or for another party.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Rachel Hamling from Prison Land Surveying in Qualicum Beach. I am the applicant for the property owner. So this really is a somewhat straightforward rezoning application. The owner would like to rezone in order to do a 2-lot subdivision, so the 2 existing apartment buildings will each have separate titled ownership. You can see the division of this on the proposed subdivision plan. So for the owner, the purpose of the rezoning and subsequent subdivision is for estate planning in the future. The owner has 2 sons, and the goal is to eventually transfer ownership. So each son would take care of the day-to-day and the maintenance of one building. This will not impact any of the tenants. I have personally spoken to a few of them and to ensure them of this. We did host a public information meeting November 20th. 13 neighbors attended, and it was explained that within a new proposed comprehensive development zone, or CD21, that the allowed number of units for each building will not change. The allowed parcel coverage will decrease to 28% to align with the parcel coverage of the current buildings. Currently, the allowed height of the buildings is 9.5 meters, and this will not change. The access to the buildings will not change. And even though the buildings are used for rental units, the current zoning actually does not require the buildings to be used as rental units. So one of the more significant changes of the CD21 zone will be the requirement that these buildings with a total of 25 units remain rentals. So no exterior renovations or additions to the buildings are proposed. So the community will not notice any physical changes to the buildings. So essentially, this is an imaginary line down to the center of the buildings to create separate ownership of the apartment buildings. We feel that this rezoning and subdivision would not impact the tenants or the surrounding neighbors. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the gallery who'd like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I have to ask this twice, actually 3 times altogether. So for the second time, is anyone who wishes to speak or present a written presentation to council regarding this topic? Seeing none, for the 3rd and final time, is anyone else who wishes to speak or present a written presentation to council regarding this topic? Seeing none, I declare this public hearing closed. And for council, a council cannot take any further information. It has to come through staff about this topic. But we can go ahead, since there is very little opposition. I would recommend that we proceed with 3rd reading. So if I have a motion to proceed with 3rd reading, Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young, discussion, all in favor, opposed, carried, and for adoption. Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, I just had one question actually to staff. On page 62 of our agenda, when we're looking at the zoning comparison, there's currently an allowance for a personal care unit, and that looks like it isn't being carried over. I'm just curious if staff could explain what the personal care unit entails and if it's something we should maybe add as well as an allowable use moving forward. Just so if someone wants to do something they used to be able to do, they don't have to come back for a council decision.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. Personal care unit would be something like a supported living situation. And so that is allowed in the zone currently. And as you will note, there are some supportive living housing developments in the area. However, if this does proceed with the current zoning as proposed, that would be removed from the use. And one of the intentions with that is to make sure it does retain the same availability as a long-term residential rental facility. Thank you.
All right. Was that adoption moved and seconded, Ms. Swenson? I need a mover and seconder for adoption. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Committee and liaison reports. I just want to say thank you to Councillor Young for acting mayor. I was in Holland for 16 days and just made it back with SQR last night, so it's very appropriate. We had a serious technical problem in Holland with an aircraft, and I'm glad I didn't take it into the air. And I also want to thank Councillor Skipsey for taking my role at the RDN while I was away. Thank you. So for public safety, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just want to point out, too, I didn't mention it during the presentation from the Historical Society, but there was that advertisement about the town. We have over 2,000 hours of sunshine every year. Apparently, there are 8,760 hours per year, so the 2,000 is less flattering, perhaps, in hindsight than we might have thought. Anyways, I just found that kind of charming when they were trying to talk up the town. It was really, that was a lovely presentation. And also, too, just for the benefit of the public, they might not know this. To speak about SQR, which the mayor recently used as well, when Michael and I were doing the surgery, they gave free tickets for Michael. I had to pay for my ticket because, obviously, I'm a councillor. I have to pay for it. That's fine. Tiara also drove us to the hotel personally flew us as well, and then gave Michael a free trip back, and we just came back on different times because he had to stay a bit longer. But anyways, a huge shout out to all the work they do and all they do in the community. Yesterday, there was an AGM for Kiwanis. One thing I did sort of float to the board is that they should consider if they feel they're in a position to look at another project in the town in the future, whether they feel that's something they're prepared to do or not, or maybe delay it for a bit. And then that's something they could either do in terms of their board as correspondence, or they could even do an in-camera delegation, because it's a provision of a service for the community, arguably. So it might be something if they just, if they feel strongly they're ready to go or not, it's up to them. But they did sort of go over all the work that's being done on the current railway site, and it's a lot of work. Renata Sutherland basically has described it as a full-time job, dealing with all the concerns, and then there's an issue with some of the contractors recently with water that we heard about, and involved some of the neighbors too. So it was really lovely to see all the work they're doing. There's been, obviously, whenever you're building something, there's the odd curveball, but they talked about how things are moving along on that site, and really excited to see things move forward with that. Jean and I sit on an informal group that looks at advocating for non-market housing in the area, and we were originally going to look at missing middle, but the province has sort of done that for us, so we don't really need to duplicate that effort. But I put together a couple 1,000-word document, sort of goes over some of the things I've heard from nonprofits at various conferences I've gone to, and just from experience being in this space for a bit, for the different steps in their process of starting from do you have land to actually getting things more operational. As well, I haven't been able to attend any of the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness meetings. We haven't had anything either for the accessibility team, but hopefully we have a meeting in the near future. And there was a member of the team who had to step aside, but I just want to thank her for all of our efforts to this point. We have a really great team on the accessibility team, so thank you very much. Just one thing that I just wanted to have as a question to staff. It's not something that needs to be immediately actioned, but occasionally I drive along Village Way, and the rainbow crosswalk in front of the high school, some people apparently sort of peel out and there's like a skid mark on it. It looks like from a motorcycle. And I was just wondering, do we have sort of like a schedule for the repainting of that? Is that something maybe we work with on the school on? Just because having those, skid marks on a Pride sidewalk isn't ideal.
Ms. Varela or Ms. Swenson.
We can check with operations and see. It wouldn't be the painting time now, but So we'll get back to
Yep.
you with the date.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. And also, too, just the idea would be that it might be a good thing if this is something that we're planning in the next year or so, like, because obviously we're not going to be doing it every few months. It's going to be spaced out, but just might be good to reach out to the school as well, because some of the students might want to, you know, even if they're just physically there while it's happening. There might be some clubs to support LGBTQ youth that might mean something to them. Also, too, I just noticed with the Historical Society, the voters list, which was handwritten. I'm just thinking of Wesley and Miss Spence and having a shudder of horror at the idea of a handwritten voters list. Anyways, there's a lot of things happening, obviously, with the end of the year, but that sort of goes over the main things. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else in my report. I think that is actually everything for today's meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I have a number of recommendations that have come from various committees. So I would like to start by moving a recommendation that the Select Committee on Parks and Recreation be involved in the drafting of quality of life survey questions related to parks and recreation.
Thank you. I'll second that. Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. With your indulgence, could I have the Director of Planning just speak to that? Because staff did provide a recommendation, but I think we took another look at that, and we might want to add a qualifier which council may want to consider before they vote.
Mr. Sales.
I'll have to apologize. If you could please repeat the question. I got sucked into an email, and I'm very sorry. So I got the referral, but not the question.
It's just that we, having the questions, when we're drafting the questions, that they're involved in helping draft the questions for the Quality of Life Survey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the indulgence. Yes, so Quality of Life Survey questions will be referred likely again to the committee members. We did already refer to all committee members an invitation to propose new questions. So, you know, recognizing that because the meetings don't necessarily align with the survey development process, and some of the committees only meet a few times a year, we reached out to individual committee members to submit some proposed questions. So that has already happened. There will be opportunities again in the future to help refine the survey. The one caveat there, and what Ms. Varela indicated, is that they would not actually likely be involved in the drafting of the questions. Drafting implies, you know, they're doing wording changes and things like that. That's why the town will be engaging, or has engaged, a professional, because it's likely, it's not staff that's developing the survey questions either. It's the consultant that will be lending their expertise to make sure the questions are worded in a way that's not biased and is up to the highest standards. So with that little wording change, you know, simply that they will be involved in the preparation of the questions, but not in the drafting. So we'd like to make an amendment to that recommendation to remove the word drafting and rephrase that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that okay with Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah.
So we'll change that word out, and then there's rather than voting on it or lay it on the table, I'll just, with Council's approval, I will just change that word, and so that it's clear. Okay, and that was seconded. Councillor Vander.
I just wanted to also ask or wonder if, rather than the select committee, which implies the whole, perhaps it should say members of that committee, so that they are being reached out to individually rather than the committee having to agree to which questions they want to bring forward.
Is Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, whether we say individual members or lump it as a whole. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I like to hear from the committee.
Yeah.
This is I think, because you can have questions and go all over the place, but we need to have some kind of, make it more concise and a broader support for that question. So I agree with leaving it as it is. Councillor Harrison? Oh, sorry, Councillor Valk, you're not finished here.
No, I was just essentially reiterating the process as it has happened so far, which is individual members have been reached out to. So I don't know if the committee thinks that they can come up with common questions, then so be it. But it might be easier to just keep going the way that we have been going so far.
Yeah, and they can certainly submit individually, but I think from a committee perspective, I think it's valuable to me that the committee comes up with questions. Further discussion. Councillor Harrison.
And just through the chair to staff, is it correct to understand that the survey would be coming back to council at some point for approval, or is this something that's sort of going to be done internally within the OCP Steering Review Committee?
Mr. Seals?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. This will definitely be coming to council for approval. So council will have a few opportunities to provide feedback, likely both as individuals, to staff, not as a group, and then also as a body reviewing the survey as a whole before it goes out to actual print. So that's very important to have the full endorsement of council and the general community in the survey, so everyone's confident in the results.
Thank you. And how did Bill 44 affect the drafting of these questions?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The legislation that's been rolled out and the policy manual that's going to be released soon will have potentially a big impact on the questions that we ask the community. One of the main purposes of the Quality of Life Survey is to keep tabs on emerging issues in the community, and also to provide feedback on those areas where residents, could potentially influence future decisions. So we basically put pause on the survey development process because until they release the housing manual, we don't know those areas where our residents will have influence on future decisions and where they won't. But we certainly know that the topic of housing is extremely important to our residents, and so we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to take part. So we just put pause. As soon as the housing manual, the policy manual comes out, we'll be taking a look at that and, reconsidering how we approach those housing questions in the Quality of Life Survey. So it has had a major influence. I'm glad you pointed that out. So the timeline will be extended probably on the order of 4 months is my guess. So that would mean survey deployment early, like spring of next year, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Young?
I heard that on the OCP must now take into account 20 years of future planning. So we have to look at with a different lens, because normally we've been looking at with a 5-year lens. So this is heavy.
Mr. Sale, any further comment?
Thank you. I have so many further comments, but I'm only going to say one. So on that particular topic, so yes, there will be very different requirements of what is included in the town's official community plan, including a provision that we must plan for 20 years of housing growth, and then update the zoning bylaw to also include pre-zoning for that 20 years of housing growth. That's a major shift. What I'd like to just quickly say is that after we have the policy manual and we know what the levers are for council to make decisions and where we still have influence, we'll be putting together a work plan, kind of stretching from probably the start of the new year through the next few years in terms of the types of documents that will need to be updated. So that OCP update that you're referring to will be a part of that work plan, but there will also be a number of other items included in the work plan, things like servicing. So thank you. Glad you pointed that out.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Ms. Councillor Skipsey.
Okay, so the next one, I would move the staff recommendation that the request dated July 12, 2023 from the residents of Qualicum Woods neighborhood to install a pump track at Crystalton Park be referred to the Parks and Green Space Service level review process.
I have a seconder. Councillor Harrison, discussion. Councillor Vander.
Yeah, I just have concerns about, I think the request from neighbors in Qualicum Woods is a lot different than their initial request is a lot different than what they're requesting now. It's much more involved. At that meeting of the Select Committee on Parks and Recreation, it was changed from just the neighbors doing the work and town just supplying gravel for the pump track to the town, supplying the design, the work, the supplies, and the maintenance. So I'm not quite sure if I think that it should go to the Parks and Green Spaces service level review process or not, because it is a very much a different request than originally.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah, well, I would hope that there could be a discussion when it comes forward at that point, and we have a more complete understanding of what exactly is involved and how much it's going to cost, especially with regard to ongoing maintenance and whatnot. I know the BMX people do an amazing job, the volunteers there, of looking after the condition of that track. So hopefully we could have a more fulsome discussion, and I did check with staff to see when that review process is scheduled to take place, and my understanding is it's Q1 of 2024. So it is timely, I guess.
Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
And then I have the third one, the late adder, that the town provide a letter of support for the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region for the purpose of maintaining MABR's United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO designation, as described in the email dated November 30th, 2023, titled Letter of Support, MABR Roundtable.
Thank you. Seconder for that? Councillor Vander, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do have a few updates. In addition to all of the strategic planning and age-friendly transportation plan update, all those other things that were taking place, I did attend the Qualicum Woods Residents Association, and I'll just say that there was a lot of discussion around the airport still, so hopefully they were listening this morning about the possibility of maybe moving to electric. As the alternate director for the RDN, I attended the Committee of the Whole, the Solid Waste Committee, the Transit Committee, and a board meeting. So I have a new appreciation for all of the time that you put in as our RDN director. Thank you. I would say November 21st was the day we received notice from the province's Minister of Finance to advise that the town of Qualicum Beach would be included in the speculation and vacancy tax. So I know the city of Parksville, I think is making a case for trying to be excluded. I don't know. We haven't had much discussion around where we stand on that, or if we want to take any action. November 23rd, attended Moonlight Madness, and it was madness in the number of people who turned out. It was great to see so many people. I think maybe the chamber might be looking at parking and how to address that in the future, because certainly people were parked everywhere just because there was such a great turnout. So it's good to see many people supporting our local retailers, especially at this time of year. I attended the council open house on November 27th. I hosted that, and there was a fairly large turnout with many new faces as well as some familiar ones. Some of the issues that were raised included concerns around the increase in taxes, especially someone had mentioned it has doubled over the last number of years. The legislation introduced by the provincial government was one of the main topics, and the draw, I think. It was called draconian, with democracy under threat. There were questions around what is the town doing and what can we do, and whether council could invite the Premier and/or Minister of Housing to Qualicum Beach to discuss their plans. And it was emphasized that now is the time to have our voices heard. So I would encourage people to attend Adam Walker's open house as well this evening. The Qualicum Residents Association held their AGM, and he was there to field questions, and it was quite eye-opening. Some of the insights and background on the legislation and how it was put through, and the implications for the town. There was an issue that was raised around the town's bylaws, and that they should be consistent with the province's new legislation for vacation rentals, so that secondary suites on the same property as a primary residence could be permitted. Currently, our bylaws don't allow that, but the provinces do. So I know short-term rental review is on our to-do list at some point, but that might be something we want to look at. There was very positive feedback about the town's communications improvements, and in particularly about the update on the projects. People really thought that that was a really beneficial information to have in the format, and they really appreciated receiving that information. There was a question around the cell tower in Eagle Crest. One was, how much do they pay the town? And I confirmed with staff that that's $17,000 annually to have the cell tower there, and that the landscaping will be completed in the spring. There was some discussion around Bill 36, another one that it has already been adopted. It was done a little while ago, but it was the understanding of our residents that the bill essentially will do away with health regions, and that everything, protocols and treatment plans will be laid out by the Minister of Health, so everything will be directed by the Minister of Health. So there are some concerns about that, and also my understanding is some of the healthcare practitioners are also concerned about this and the implications that it has for them. And so we may see some health practitioners not wanting to serve under this new bill and conditions. November 28th, I did attend the board meeting. I just wanted to mention the French Creek Pollution Control Center. That was, there was a report, the liquid waste management plan came forward. And the sewer treatment place, basically, serves a population of 29,000. And the current planning is based on an estimated annual growth of 1.39%. It's been around for a while, that facility, and so there are a lot of improvements that are needed there. The capital plan identifies just over $112 million that's going to be needed, and that'll be spent over the next 10 years. So the average household in Qualicum Beach will increase from $456 in 2023 up to $882 in 2032. So an increase of $47 annually. And as the mayor has said, there's other expenses that are also coming from regional services as well. On December 1st, we hosted the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Roundtable here at the town, and there was mention that there could be some assistance with our OECMs if we wanted to move on that, and that came up during strategic planning, that if there was an opportunity for someone else to do all the heavy lifting, that perhaps they could move forward earlier. But so there may be some assistance with preparing a management plan, and also all of the consulting fees and whatnot that would be required to do that. So that would be looking at perhaps one of our well fields and having a management plan and looking at conservation around that land.
You may want to say what the acronym stands for.
Oh, I know. It's I have to get out my list of what it is. Other effective area-based conservation measures. So it relates to the federal government's push for 30% biodiversity by 2030 and the provincial government's 25% by 2025. So yeah, as I mentioned about the Qualicum Residents Association, I think that's it. I think that was the end of my list. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander.
Thank you. Well, I had a quieter schedule this go around. Since our last council meeting, I've attended 3 meetings as a town liaison. And from those 3 meetings, I have 7 items or points that I would like to tell you about. The first meeting was on the 17th of November with the Qualicum Beach Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber was busy planning holiday events, including, of course, Moonlight Madness. And Moonlight Madness, I found out, I didn't realize that previously, is something that's not specific to Qualicum Beach. There are many other communities that do celebrate Moonlight Madness. But of course, I think we had the best one. And we had the pipe band bringing in council and Santa to the square. Santa got most of the attention. We had dancing elves turning on the Christmas tree lights, merchants decorating their stores and staying open late, an outdoor movie playing, fiddlers fiddling at Echo Theatre, roving street performers, and the first ever night farmers market. I think Santa really enjoyed himself along with everyone else. And I think the Chamber and the town are to be commended for making it a very successful event. At the Chamber meeting, there was also discussion regarding plans to replace the Visitor Information Center. And as we discussed earlier in this meeting, the town will be contributing funds for washrooms in a new building, which will be a welcome amenity on the waterfront, appreciated by residents, visitors, and I would think especially the Shell service station across the street that are constantly getting requests, could we use your washroom? Thirdly, the Chamber would like to set up a program with Qualicum Secondary School to help students explore different career possibilities. And last month, Councillor Skipsey and I were part of the program from a different angle and had 2 students following us and seeing what Councillor and people in Town Hall are up to. The second meeting I attended was with the board of the St. Andrew's Lodge Historical and Cultural Society on the 20th of November. And 2 topics of discussion, not the only, but 2, that I thought interesting were their upcoming campaign for fundraising to help fund the restoration of the lodge, and looking at proposals for this restoration by architects and by architectural and engineering consultants. So it's an exciting time for this society, and they are hoping to get things rolling soon. The third meeting I attended was with the board of the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association on the 29th of November. Many topics were discussed, among which was the launch in early 2024 of the Destination Think study. This study sets out a plan for enhancing tourism in our area in a sustainable way. Destination Think works with a concept they call Place DNA, which looks at the existing character and feel of a place and suggests ways to honor and work with that character rather than trying to change it or make it into something else. Not Disneyland. Lastly, the town of Qualicum Beach short-term vacation rentals impact on affordability report, that's a long title, was completed and shared with town staff, and council is to receive the report from staff for discussion at the January council meeting. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vander Valk. Councillor Young.
Since the last meeting, I attended many Remembrance Day ceremonies. One was at the Legion, where our mayor got the first poppy. Also, the Rotary Club set up the Field of Crosses, and we had the service at the Town Civic Center for Remembrance Day. I also am part of the Qualicum Beach Garden Club, and we have monthly meetings with various speakers, and I highly recommend people to attend. The fee to join the Qualicum Beach Garden Club is inexpensive, and there's lots of tips that are handed out, and it's a nice little social as well. I also attend the Qualicum Beach Museum Board monthly meetings, and as you can see, they do an awesome job. I also attended the 3-day BC Affordable Housing Conference, which I learned about the availability of funding resources available to be stacked for a housing project. But to get through all that, you basically have to have a design consultant to do that for you. It's also an idea floated out there about building retrofits would be funded, and also that nonprofit organizations such as faith organizations, or like, for instance, the Rotary, if they wanted to consider building affordable housing, that would be a welcome opportunity. Also attended the Qualicum Beach Resident Association communication meeting with our CEO, Lou Varela, and that's always so wonderful that we have our staff that is always very open and welcoming all your questions and giving you the answers that you're hoping to hear. Also, of course, the Tree Light Moonlight Madness was another fabulous annual event for us, and definitely want to thank the Chamber of Commerce, all the volunteers, the Qualicum Beach Collective, and our staff. It was, like Petronella said, it was a fabulous event. Also attended as your trustee for the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board. They also have a monthly meeting, and currently we're discussing budget. And I just want to mention again, we do have a lovely, lovely library that offers many services. And one of the one that I have found so useful is the tech support that they have. You can book an appointment with Nathan, or sometimes quite often you can just drop in, he's there. If you have any questions regarding any tech challenges regarding your iPhone or your iPad or computer, he will always try to find you the answer and give you the support. And having tech knowledge is so important because so many of our committees and events have their postings online to save out the newsletter handout or the posters. And for example, especially Tosh, our the school art gallery, they always have online posting of all their events and activities, as well as the Qualicum Beach Museum and many other. And also, I also want to mention the Oceanside Hospice. This November 28th was Giving Tuesday. It's a worldwide initiative, and it was a reach out from many of our non-profit organizations to think about them and kindly donate. And I'm also suggesting that come this holiday season, if you have friends or family members that have everything and you don't know what to give them, donate to one of these nonprofit organizations on their behalf, whether it's the old schoolhouse, the museum, Oceanside Hospice, or even our Flowerstone Society, which offers working with the Flowerstone Clinic, providing nurse practitioner services and trying to increase that availability for all of us. That there's 10,000 people that don't have doctors, and the clinic could certainly use support. Also attended the WITS assembly at our elementary school. That was a conflict resolution strategy that local leaders like Peter from our fire department, Chief Rikama, and our mayor, so I attended on his behalf. It was to talk with the youth of our community and how to resolve conflict resolutions, and hopefully that it would inspire them to also to be leaders, and that all the leaders currently abide by that. Also attended the Qualicum Beach Resident AGM, and with guest speaker Adam Walker. And as Anne mentioned, it's wonderful that they have this AGM that is available to all the residents of Qualicum Beach to join, and they address all the current topics that might be of interest to us. And also, again, a reminder to attend Adam Walker's open house tonight if you have interest in understanding what the housing legislation has been passed. And also, I attended the other evening the open house regarding the proposed residential and medical development clinic building that is going to be on Beach and First. And looking forward to that actually happening at some point. And happy holidays.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Back to staff reports. Ms. Svensson?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. We have some recommendations to change the meeting schedule for 2024 to add a new committee of the whole public engagement session for the financial plan on Wednesday, January 17th at 2 p.m. And then we would also like to add a new committee of the whole also for public engagement on the financial plan on Wednesday, January the 24th at 6 p.m. to offer an evening session. And then we would propose to cancel the May 8th council meeting, the regular council meeting, and add a new meeting of Wednesday, May 1st.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to effect? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Carry on, Ms. Svensson.
Thank you. Next on page 85 to 87 of your agenda package, we have several special events that we would like to get a head start on for 2024. So there's a list of events that we're asking to be approved in principle, and those are town-sponsored events. And then we're also asking for a resolution for 2 events that we've received applications for, which is the coldest night of the year and the Oceanside Mother's Day race.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I just point out that it's great to see Coldest Night of the Year looking to be hosted in Qualicum Beach this year. I know not with the current Parks Council, but the previous Parks Council, sometimes they had a bit of a hard time when they had some asks for, they wanted to serve chili at Orca Place actually at the end of the run, and that was something they couldn't actually do. So it's great to see them showing up in town. And it's something, I remember Neil Horner used to participate this all the time. I try to participate as best I can, and it's a great event.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded for all the events. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Finance, Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the 2024 budget is being worked on by staff right now. And as per the timetable that was discussed at the backgrounder, the budget will come forward or will be approved in March. That timing of approval poses some challenges for some of the capital projects which will be included in the budget. We've listed the capital projects here, so wildfire skid unit, the Crescent Beach culvert, engineering airport, runway paving, and the water pump house electronics. The wildfire skid unit is basically a suppression unit comprised of a 300 to 400 gallon water tank. And early approval is being requested so that we can receive it by May in time for the wildfire season. Again, waiting for budget approval won't allow that delivery to take place by May. And the Crescent Beach culvert is a culvert that poses some risk to the municipality, and early approval is being requested to avoid cost escalation so that we can receive tender bids on the project when contractors are forming their work plans. And that's a significant project. We're looking for 1.875 million budget approval at this point in time for that project. The engineering airport runway paving is a $2 million project which is fully anticipated to be fully grant funded, and we're looking for early budget approval for the engineering works for that, which are required for the grant application and will be basically eligible for reimbursement under that grant if we're successful in the grant application. And the water pump house electronics, again, early approval is being requested for $100,000 due to timing of delivery and to be able to install these in accordance with the operation department's work plans.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Any questions to Mr. Hare about this? Councillor Harrison.
These all seem quite reasonable, and I'm happy to approve them. The only thing I'm sorry, I might be just a bit foggy, and if the fault's on mine, my apologies. But I was also remembering that we, in the previous council term, we were talking about bank stabilization in a couple areas, and it was deemed to be a little bit risky. Is there any prudence in having a bit of flexibility too, in case something comes up? I'm just thinking if there is, a very wet winter or we have some issues. Is there any need for us to have, looking forward to some of those projects? Because I'm just thinking of the one where I think it was next year was the first one we were supposed to be looking at. And I'm just curious about the timelines for that, and if, I'm assuming it's all fine.
I think you're referring to like Butterball and Seacrest? Those
no, those are the second ones. Yeah, Bay Street, yeah.
Bay Street.
Yeah.
If I may, we are progressing the actual engineering. The geotechnical engineering is pretty extensive, and the monitoring of the groundwater and the soil conditions. So we aren't even able to progress that from a construction perspective yet. So that's why we're not asking for those in particular. They are very urgent, but we need to do our due diligence before we proceed.
Thank you. So it's moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded. Councillor Young, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. And that's why I think it's great that staff is working towards completing our financial planning before the year end. So it actually, when the new year starts, we're ready. And we've moved it ahead from last year, but I think it's good to work towards having it done before the year end in the future. Thank you. Planning, Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The next item on the agenda is a development variance permit application for a property at 119 Fern Road East. So council will be aware that development variance permits are often used to vary conditions in the zoning bylaw. That's the most frequent application, but they can be used to vary other parts of the Local Government Act, which include sign bylaws. So this is a development variance permit to vary the town's sign bylaw to allow a sign that is larger than the permitted area and also includes larger lettering than permitted in the sign bylaw. Next slide. So this is a perspective rendering of what the sign would look like on the building. So you're familiar with the actual business. It's Lordco, has been in operation for a number of years. This is the second application that Lordco has made for this sign. There was a development variance permit submitted several years ago as well for a very similar approach. Next slide. So this is a comparison of what's currently permitted in the sign bylaw as compared to what is proposed by the applicant. So their maximum letter size in the sign bylaw is 200 millimeters, which is around 10 inches. And that's a size that is essentially pedestrian scale, right? So for a pedestrian that's not moving very quickly, likely not as far from the sign, then that is entirely readable. It's around 10 inches. The proposed sign is more than four times that. So it's really, in the opinion of staff, more geared towards a highway type signage, to be viewed from larger distances from, perhaps a fast moving vehicle. So because of the location, in this case, staff don't recommend moving forward with this. The lettering size in particular is really not warranted to the location of the sign. The second part here, which is the maximum size area, it's less of a variance that they're requesting. 2.5 meters is the maximum sign area. They've requested 3.47, so it's a variance of around 1 square meter in size. Two notes in their letter. So first of all, they note that there are a few other locations in town with signs that exceed this lettering size. So the two examples, one was Quality Foods. That was approved by council at the time that the building overall was approved. The lettering was a part of that approval process. So that's how that came into place. And then, of course, they cited the Petrocan, which used to be there. And the sign bylaw was adopted in 1995, and that sign predates that. So You can certainly find exceptions to all sorts of town bylaws, especially when they happened before the bylaw was adopted. The other note in the letter is that blue is discouraged in the design guidelines. However, that actually, it wouldn't be a grounds for refusing the permit. So really the issue at hand here is the size of the lettering and size of the maximum sign. So with that, the recommendation is to refuse this application. Thank you, Mayor Westbrook.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Just a question. When we had our election signs, did all the election signs, those big billboards, they align with our sign bylaw, or were they an exception?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Through the chair to Councillor Young. Election signs do have an exemption in the sign bylaw, and so those are not included. They're not regulated in the same way. So you don't need a permit for an election sign, and you also the same sort of limitations on lettering would not apply.
Councillor Vander, Councillor Harrison.
I just have one question. In the letter of rationale, on the second paragraph, it says the proposed signage offers the latest energy-efficient technologies. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Do you know? Sorry.
Mr. Seals?
Through the chair, I'm not clear on what that's a referral to either. Thank you.
So it definitely wouldn't be like a neon sign or electric sign. I have no idea what that means.
Thank you. Just for clarity, so I do believe that the sign, they are proposing that the letters would be lit. So the town sign bylaw prohibits the majority of the sign from being illuminated. However, it does allow illuminated lettering. So you will see that on some signs through the town, like TD Bank is an example, where the letters themselves are illuminated, but the area around is not allowed to be illuminated. So that would be a similar approach to what they're proposing here.
Thank you.
Mr. Harrison.
Yeah, so I do see how, in terms of like the sign area, the variance for me would be reasonable that they're asking. I think we could do that, although I understand why staff would want to go to us to check that. I do see the maximum letter height as a pretty big variance, roughly 4 times. I'm trying to think back to because I think this came back in the previous term, Mayor Westbrook, where they proposed, I think it was very early in the previous term, they proposed something and we tried to work out a compromise. And maybe if staff could just refresh my memory, because I'm sorry I'm a bit foggy on that, but I do recall this sign coming before us as a council previously.
Mr. Seals?
Thank you, through the chair to Councillor Harrison. I don't have the date in front of me, the exact date. I do see that it was 2019, so you are correct that it was during the previous council term, but I don't have the exact lettering size from the previous application or the exact council date.
Because again, it's been about 4 years, so my apologies, I'm a bit hazy on that too. But I thought we tried to reach some sort of compromise, but we allowed them to go a little bit over. Because personally, if they would say, well, we need to be slightly larger than the 200 millimeters as permitted, what I'm thinking we might want to do is give them like a maximum number they can go over for a variance, and it has to be within, whether it's 400 millimeters or whatever the number is. So I'm just picking 400 because it's twice. But we might want to give some sort of guidance that you can submit something that's within this much of a variance. It still needs to go through a variance process, but anything past that number, I'm sorry, it's just too much of an ask. And I'm not sure, maybe it's something that we could, like before we just randomly pick a number, it might be something where we might want to have staff at a future meeting, maybe say, okay, if it's this much, this is a bit, it can be supportive because there's some other examples that are roughly that size, but what you're asking is a bit maybe too much, and then they can move forward in a way where they still get a variance, but it's not quite as imposing on a staff side.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah, I would be happy to work towards a compromise on this. I think that I don't find the sign that, like, I think it's quite attractive. Actually, I like the blue. I just think that maybe the main part, the word Lordco, is a bit too large. But otherwise, I don't really have an issue with it.
Okay. Councillor Young.
I'm just curious, how did they come up with the size of the lettering? Is that common for all their other signs in their other businesses? So they're staying with a standard branding? Yeah. Oh, okay.
So what I'm hearing is the blue is fine, size a bit much. I'm looking at another similar situation, which is Home Hardware. It's not a highway sign, but it's very attractive. I think it's in the same context as what you were talking about, what's appropriate. Qualicum Beach, when we go, and we'll see this again from our quality of life survey, people like the small town atmosphere. They like the town character. And an industrialized sign on if it's on a highway, I agree. They need bigger exposure. But on a side road, perhaps could be a little bit less. So what I'm hearing and what I can, and the applicant is in the room so they can hear it for themselves, we're looking at a compromise. And I say take a close look at Home Hardware, very effective, it fits the town character. So the color's not an issue, but so I say refer this back to staff would be the appropriate motion. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, all in favor? Opposed of any? Carried. Thank you. Downtown development cost charges, Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. This report was provided at the request of Council. Council wants to take a look at the DCC reduction bylaw and how it currently impacts developments in the village neighborhood. So just for background, development cost charges are a financing mechanism where local governments can levy charges on developments for the purpose of covering at least some portion of the costs required for increased development. So it's directly related to the impact of development. It's not, these funds aren't used for, say, repair or maintenance or anything. It's just like, imagine the development is proposed, and because of this development, a pipe needs to be upsized. So that it's somewhere in the community. That's the type of project that DCCs are applicable to. The town's DCC bylaw is quite outdated. It was last updated in 2006. The town has started a DCC review in the interim, but didn't complete it. DCCs will absolutely be on the review for the review schedule for the next few years as we, wrestle with all the housing changes and all the changes that the province has brought down, because there are financing changes they've introduced as well. There's a new amenity contribution charge, a little bit of a detour, but at any rate, yes, the town, rather than doing a full DCC review, in 2012, Council directed staff to prepare a DCC reduction bylaw, and that DCC reduction bylaw would only apply in the village neighborhood, which is the area kind of within walking distance of the commercial center, and that's the area where the town has long intended to have growth. So Council at the time saw this as an incentive to encourage more development in that area. So there's a few different categories of DCC reductions that are included in that bylaw. And I do have them on a slide. Wesley, if you'd be willing to just pull those up. Staff overall recommend that the town take a more holistic perspective of the DCC bylaw and review the DCC bylaw itself and the DCC reduction bylaw as one piece, so through one process. However, there is an alternative here. Next slide. That would allow Council to identify the specific areas where Council would like to maintain a reduction or exemption, and those areas where the town or Council does not want to see DCCs reduced in the future. So these are the categories where DCCs are currently reduced by the DCC reduction bylaw. Not-for-profit housing, for-profit affordable housing, where the definition of affordable is registered on title, so it can't change over time. Secondary suites, garden suites, carriage houses, DCC reduction bylaw for increased residential density in the village neighborhood, and DCC reductions for developers that are advancing with higher energy efficiency standards than otherwise required by the BC Building Code. So if Council does want to, take more of an a la carte method to amending the bylaw, you could pick one from this list or multiple, and staff could prepare an amendment to the DCC bylaw to eliminate or alter those exemptions. If there are any questions, I'd be pleased to take them. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, the regional district wants to supersede all of these. Whatever we change, they stay in effect. Any questions? Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey. Go ahead, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I would like to amend the bylaw, and I would like to amend it by striking like on page 106, it lists the conditions. So under the first one, I, the 30% in respect to residential improvements having a density over, I would like to strike that one. I would like to strike the second one and the third one, but leave the fourth one, and change it by up to 100% in respect to new eligible housing. And that would allow us to continue to waive the DCCs for affordable housing, and also, at this point, laneway or carriage housing. So the eligible housing category would stay, but everything else would be struck. And so I would make a motion to move that. I certainly see that the City of Parksville charges DCCs, and that seems to haven't slowed down development there. So I think we should get our share, and it's $1.8 million. It's not just a little bit of money. It's enough money to help our coffers, so and help the taxpayers. So I would move that the Council directs staff to prepare an amendment to this bylaw to achieve the following purpose of allowing DCCs to be waived up to 100% in respect to new eligible housing.
Thank you. So when you say you move that, that means the I and the first, second, and third be completely taken away. All right? So that's the motion by Councillor Skipsey. Have a seconder? Councillor Vander, Valk, are you seconding?
Well, I have another comment.
No, I need a seconder before you can start debate, or if we don't let you going anywhere.
Yes.
You second it? Discussion? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just wondering on the definition for eligible housing, C, secondary suites, garden suites, and carriage houses. I wonder if there's any benefit to asking that it be an addition to an existing house versus housing that is built under the new legislation. I don't know if anybody has any idea how that would relate.
Question, but it may be tough to answer, Mr. Sale.
Through the chair, and in response to your comment, you're absolutely correct that until we have the policy manual, we don't know the extent to which this would apply to the new housing. Certainly the town's definition of a secondary suite and garden suite says that those units cannot be stratotitled, and there's a very specific maximum area for those. So if it continues to meet those definitions, I don't see why we would necessarily no longer be supporting it. But regardless, why don't we put that discussion kind of onto the side right now, because we don't know the answer until the province releases the policy manual.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So could I suggest that staff are directed to bring back a report on implications of this approach and in consideration of timelines and all of those things? Because again, as we start to add big pieces of work, we're going to have to face the hard challenge of we're going to have to delay some other things. So I'd really like to be able to provide a staff report to say, is this something that could be easily managed once we have the policy manual in hand, or is there a larger discussion to bring back to Council?
Thank you. I think the intent to stop waiving DCCs, for what Councillor Skipsey aptly explained, is still the motivator for all of this. Mm-hmm. However, in light of the changes and new acts and bills, it may be better to refer this back to staff and look at all the implications of it. But I certainly support the idea of not waiving the DCCs. And as you said, in Parksville, it definitely hasn't slowed anything down. And it's not that it adds to our coffers. This is to cover the cost of increases to the burden of our infrastructure. This is not something that is a kind of a tax grab. This is a scientific number that comes up after you figure out how much does it take to provide the services to these developments. And so it doesn't affect the existing taxpayers, commercial or residential, but that new development pays for its services as they increase. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, well, I would just point out for secondary suites are already allowed in the town, and the provincial legislation regarding secondary suites is you have to allow them. We already do. So that shouldn't really have an impact because we already allow it. But I actually don't think this is wise. I think we should definitely be doing an update of our DCCs, but I'd point out in terms of, if we're going to talk about the money in our coffers as a town, I'd refer to a study that was done in 2021 for the City of Ottawa by Hemson Consulting. There's a CBC News article online you can look up. Just quoting it for a couple of paragraphs, infill development is known to be much cheaper for cities than adding new subdivisions, and City of Ottawa staff have shared estimates on how much the municipality saves and spends depending on where development happens. The city had Hemson Consulting Limited review a major study it had done and update some of the numbers from 2012 to reflect how city costs and tax bills have changed over 9 years. Hemson found it costs the City of Ottawa $465 per person each year to serve new low-density homes built on undeveloped land, over and above what it receives for property taxes and water bills. On the other hand, high-density infill development, such as apartment buildings, pays for itself and leaves the city with an extra $606 per capita each year, a financial benefit that has grown by $151 in the last 9 years. Then you cross-reference that also with the regional municipality of Halifax. They did a 2005 study on the comparative costs for different types of housing for their services. And you can go through the list. It's way cheaper for every type of service we provide compared to the sort of residential density we usually see, which is about 1/5 of an acre, 1/4 of an acre for a household. You're going to see roughly half the cost for fire per capita, almost half the cost for policing per capita. School busing is 10 times cheaper. And I could go on, like roads is way cheaper as well. It's 150 times cheaper. So I think in terms of looking at this, it requires a robust financial analysis that, quite frankly, we don't have. And having a reactionary approach where we just take away incentives for the type of density which actually provides us with income over the long run is very short-sighted. I wouldn't suggest that we do carve-outs a la carte. I would suggest we review the whole thing as one whole thing. If we want to advance that faster than 2028, fair enough, but that might be something where we have a staff report in terms of the implications of that, because it will be a big thing. But my thing is that we should be charging way more for DCCs for someone who is tearing down a single-family home and putting up a McMansion, as opposed to higher density infill, because that's what actually provides us with more revenue as a town over time.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah, well, I would just like to know approximately what the timeline would be to receive a report from staff on the steps that we would need to go through to amend the bylaw.
Rilla?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I will have to take that away and come back to you. It is December 6th. We do have one more on December 13th, but that agenda deadline has passed. Then we're moving into the Christmas holidays. So what I'd like the opportunity to do is to come back and report back out at the first meeting in January on that timeline.
So I think we'd have very little choice but to accept that information as vital for our timing of what we want this done. And I also agree that it has to be based on science. We're not saying that we're going to charge development in town that has the roads and water and sewer services, but it does affect our traffic and our intersections and perhaps the cost of improving this intersection because of the growth in the areas of what we're talking about. So I believe in science in this, that it's not based on a number just because somebody else has it, but it's on our own information. So I respectfully ask that we defer this to a future council meeting when staff has the time to prepare for a more complete answer. Councillor Harrison, seconded. I'll second it. Discussion?
Sorry, and just for clarity, this is a motion to defer to a future council meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seconded. I second that. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Skipsey opposed. Thank you. Engineering and operations. Mr. Robertson. No? Sorry, Commissioner Varela. Sorry.
Sorry about that, Your Worship. So we have asked the airport manager to attend today to talk to council about the possibility of an airport master plan. We did have this on as a considered initiative through your strategic planning process. Council's direction was to refer it to a subsequent meeting. Our challenge is that we're pinched up between the application time for this possible grant, and then reporting out to council on the airport consultation plan, which will occur in January. So in the interim, we thought we could ask the airport manager to attend, answer any questions council may have, and if you do provide direction to authorize submission of the grant application for the Qualicum Beach Airport Master Plan, we would take that as direction to include it back into your strategic initiative for 2024.
Thank you. Based on the presentations we had earlier today, I think having a master plan to include those future potentials, which is not a pipe dream, and I like what the manager of SQAir, the owner of SQAir, told us today. Same with from Sealand, that this is a real opportunity for our airport. At first, I wasn't too keen on an airport master plan because of all the negativity, and it's only one airline, what are we going to do with it? This brings it a whole new perspective, and I think it's quite exciting. And it's not a pipe dream. It's based on reality. It's where it's going. So for us to prepare a master plan to accommodate having phase 3 charging, whatever services we need to do to attract those electric planes, I think is a real economic opportunity, but also for the environment to have a much better and cleaner industry. Councillor Harrison.
No, I'm just going to move the recommendation that we apply for that.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Young, discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Oh, I just don't know if anyone else noticed when the presentation where the gentleman from Sealand mentioned how Campbell River is set now to be a hub for the maintenance work for electric airplanes. That's something which I know I mentioned at an airport users committee meeting 6 months ago. And these are the sort of opportunities where if we're an early mover, we can be the place where people go to get the training on how to maintain those sorts of short-range aircraft. And then it creates a whole bunch of spin-off jobs in our community. Because whenever you have people earning money in our area, there's always an economic multiplier. It creates more jobs. Different industries, more jobs. Different industries, less jobs. But there's always a benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start by stating that I am really concerned about the tax increase that our residents might be facing this year. And this was one of the ones that I thought we could push off during strategic planning. It was a new initiative that was introduced, and it was mentioned that a report would be coming forward on December 6th to provide more information on what it would do and what it would involve, the framework. So in not having that information, I think it makes it a little bit difficult to support going forward. I'm also, I totally support what was proposed, or the presentation from the delegation this morning, and I'm excited actually at the opportunities there. But I do think that we could go ahead with that without having the airport master plan first. But anyways, given that the presentation happened today, and I think that most of the rest of council would support having a master plan, I will go along with it. But certainly I think we're going to have to make some tough decisions at some point and cut some of the things that our taxpayers can't afford. I don't even know what we're looking at, 6, 7, 8. I don't know what our tax increase might be. So I'm just concerned about the bottom dollar.
Let's not speculate what it will be. But if I could ask Mr. Goldfuss, is this grant application cost also not covered, potentially covered by grants?
So the grant opportunity provides $35,000. So we put in the budget $75,000 for council's consideration for a master plan. That is an estimate. and we feel that it can be done within that range. So the grant opportunity, it closes on the 22nd of December. So if council approves, we have to start the application process. And like I say, it's a $35,000 grant opportunity that would go towards that.
Right, and as far as the total cost, which is an issue and a concern, could it be, as far as a master plan, be focused on electric charging facilities, accommodations, training, repair? So the focus of this master plan is on electric future for airplanes. Can that be done that way, so we don't do not a huge, I mean, it's a little airport. It's got one runway, got three flights a day, one way or the other. It's not a huge airport. And it sounds like we're going to try and make it into an airport. We can't extend the runway. But here today, this morning, we heard about some opportunities that I think the master plan should focus on, in my opinion. Is that possible? I'm not saying that's what we should do. Council decides that. But can we come up with a master plan that focuses strictly on these future opportunities that we heard about today?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, you can. A master plan can be tailored in such a way so that it, obviously would include the electrification, bringing in three-phase power to the airport to be able to achieve that. It can also, it could include other things, such as infrastructure improvements around hangar expansion, water and sewer improvements. We heard about solar power opportunities this morning as well. So yes, it's a living document, so it could be tailored. And I think it's important to note that as any living document, it can be changed and it becomes part of your financial plan. So we can add to it, we can delete as per direction from council.
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
And again, Your Worship, staff would like to apologize for not being able to meet that commitment of a report by December 6th. But the airport manager is happy to answer any questions about, additional rationale for the airport master plan. So again, staff's apologies, but you do have a real live person here who can answer any of your questions.
I hate to think of the opposite. Okay. Councillor Harris.
And I would just state that I'm glad we're not doing a weekend at Bernie's kind of thing where we don't have someone who's alive, a real person. But for me, the two things I'd be really thinking about for the airport master plan, one would be linking it to things like Delvey that was done through the Parksville Chamber of Commerce, where they have a fulfillment center. And then how do we loop in this everything's done online, you're shipping goods back and forth in 2-day delivery, and then how do we use our airport as a point for some of those delivery services to deliver goods to commercial businesses on the island? I think there's a huge opportunity there for our airport. It generates flights, it doesn't compete with passenger air, so you don't have 2 or 3 airlines all cannibalizing each other and eventually no one makes money. So that would be one thing. And the other thing would be the hydrogen fuel infrastructure, which I know very little about. I know the province is trying to push that for vehicles as the future of long haul trucking. That's where it's not going to be so much the batteries, because the batteries for long haul trucks are actually a big portion of how much space you have. So I'm not sure how that would interact with existing systems. The three-phase power, to Councillor Skipsey's point, she's actually correct. Three-phase power is something we don't need a whole plan for. It's not too difficult. But the hydrogen, the logistical chains for that, is that something we're going to be seeing? What are the timelines? That's something where I have a huge question mark. I honestly don't know. That might be a good question to answer, as Tiara did bring that up in her presentation. But I do think that there are opportunities for not just passenger service, but other uses of the airport that generate revenue for the town that we might want to look at in conjunction with being a sustainable airport that I think is a real, genuine economic opportunity for us.
Thank you. Councillor Young?
I agree with Councillor Harrison. I do think it's a good economic driver for us, having an airport. I also think that $75,000 is a lot of money, but it is not that big compared to other proposals. We had a resident that lobbied on how much it would cost to have signage on our streets, and she came up with a number that was $150,000 just for signs, for slowing the traffic speed in our community. So I'm wondering, though, if we can stack our grant funding to maybe apply for, as mentioned, there was a green funding source as well, or because we're going to go electric.
Thank you. Mr. Goldfuss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not aware of that. I guess we could look into that. This grant is specific to airport master planning. Airport master planning is becoming quite common for airports of our size, and this is why the province, through the BC Air Access Program, has provided this funding to see that airports of our size are establishing master plans for decision making. Master plans like these types of documents could be considered something like being shovel ready, so to speak, for projects that come up. And so when we have master plans and different documents in place like this, it'll benefit the town in funding moving forward if there's any other grants available.
Thank you. Councillor Vander.
I just had a question for Mr. Goldfuss. If you had written a report, what would it have said?
Thank you. It would have recommended that you approve a master plan and provide direction to staff to apply for the grant.
It's not quite what I meant.
Okay.
What would be the benefits of doing that, and why would it be a good idea? How about that?
Thank you. So the benefits are a master plan will provide clarity around infrastructure development and improvements. So as I mentioned, such things as hangar development, land use planning, water and sewer infrastructure, electric infrastructure to provide three-phase power for electric aircraft, possibly, like I said, solar energy to support that as well. One of the things when we speak about three-phase power, for an example, we know we have three-phase power on Bennett Road, and it terminates at Mariloma. Okay, so we know it's there, but what we're going to have to do as staff, if council wishes, and it would be nice to get some direction on this, is to work with BC Hydro to see what that infrastructure is going to detail, because there will be a lot of work required to bring that infrastructure into the airport. There will be a cost. We're not clear on those costs, but it would be nice to have that direction so that we can start, like I say, working with BC Hydro to get a better understanding of the infrastructure that's going to be required and the costs associated.
Councillor Harrison?
And to that point, I know for the master plan, it would probably the RDN wouldn't want to support things, but as we're looking at the hard infrastructure costs to make our airport more environmentally sustainable, I know that's a real priority in the strategic plan for the RDN. Might be a great conversation several months from now. The other thing I'd highlight with this is that it might be good also to look at the operations in terms of how do we manage as the airport authority our relationship with the businesses that are operating there, ensuring that how we do leases, how we do business permits, this very sort of meat and potatoes side of things. That's vital for the businesses, but for council we usually don't get involved in, nor should we. I know there have been some concerns about that with some of the users. So, there are benefits beyond just like physical infrastructure side to also like how do we make sure that our operations are up to modern standards for working with that. But yeah, I do think that as we get more information about those sorts of costs, it'd be great to have conversations at the regional level of you're not paying our operating costs, fair enough, that's how it is, but here's an infrastructure opportunity where it'd be great to have the RDN like to contribute to the looping, to contribute to some of that power extension to the airport.
It's easy for me to agree with you here, but I may have some other concerns when I'm at the other table. But when I came up with the idea to pay off the mortgage for search and rescue, at first there was some reluctance, but in the end I realized that's a benefit to the entire area. This would also be a benefit to the entire area. I've been at several airport appreciation days where the mayor of Parksville spoke highly of our airport because people stay at Nanaimo and other places, but they fly in from wherever they come from to Qualicum Beach. So it has a huge benefit, and this is something that meets their strategic plan. So I would definitely pick that up. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I guess when not having the consultant's report. I thought that the consultant report might cover off some of those governance structure, those kinds of decisions about, yeah, so I guess not having that, it's difficult to know where that's going to be covered off, but it's definitely important. But part of me just wants to take the 40,000 and put it towards extending the phase 3 power. You know, like at some point it feels like a lot of plans and talk, and I'd like the money to go towards doing something sometimes. So
that is a fair comment. So, Mr. Goldfuss, when we go through this process, could electrification at the airport be something that we would get a grant for because we have a master plan? Would that be more likely to be successful?
Thank you, Your Worship. It would certainly help. And again, what it demonstrates is that the town is doing their due diligence with respect to long-term planning for the airport. So it provides the framework for decision making, and it will be very helpful moving forward for grant applications.
Thank you. I had one question, not so much what we just talked about, but one of the issues that have plagued us numerous times is the noise of helicopter training. And I know some of the training has to take place at the airport, but there's also a facility that the forest forestry has just outside Parksville, I think just past the first turnoff, where it's enclosed, it's safe. The argument, well, you know, you can't have motorcycles driving through when you're training helicopters. There's no motorcycles driving through on that site. It's completely fenced in. It's on a drone location. I've seen helicopters there. Could they not train in some other locations and share that burden? Because it's a burden to our community when it happens on a frequent and often very noisy times of day. So is that an option that we would consider during the master plan?
Thank you, Your Worship. So at this point, I'm not clear on Transport Canada requirements with respect to the amount of area. When I look at the forestry area off of Highway 19, it appears to be quite small, and it is surrounded by quite a bit of residential commercial development. So it's something that staff could look into.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to proceed with the application for a grant. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? All in favor? Carry unanimously. Thank you. Other than the review of the comments, need a motion to close. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, all in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. We are closed. We'll take a 5-minute recess and we'll reconvene right here for the in-camera session. Thank you.